as you might know me, the father of Loin Boy. Today is Monday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, and I'm launching my little Monday night podcast. Why? Because I want you guys to always be informed on the latest crazy going on in the world. I want you to see the spinning wheels shooting off as our carriage we're in careens off a cliff and explodes all the way down, but at least it shoots out fireballs because that's what makes it interesting to watch. I want you to have insight into God as he watches this clown show that humans have created go nuts on our watch. And I want us to laugh, cry, get angry, and then take a nap. Why? Because you've tuned in live. Very rare to have a podcast that's live, but mine is, and my son's. So enjoy yourself. Sit back, have a beverage, eat some popcorn, have some pie. But whatever you do, don't take for granted this theme song that makes everything right with the world on Monday nights. You're welcome. Hey, everybody. It's me, God's comic Brad Stine. This is Brad Stine Has Issues, and do I? This is where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. My name, Brad Stine. My nickname, moniker, God's Comic, given me by New Yorker Magazine 2004, and behind the camera, producing tech support, and my good old-fashioned sidekick is the very man that wouldn't exist had he not issued from my loins, my son, Wyatt Stine. Son, how are you, and what the heck has taken you so long to jump in and ruin my monologue?
Well, I figured,
I don't know. We established that a couple of podcasts ago. There is no because I don't know, or I wouldn't ask. We already established. We had a whole routine about that. We even went out on Instagram, son. You're not going to return to that nonsense, are you?
Okay, I was trying to give you the benefit of the doubt. I was trying to be like, let's just turn over a new leaf to new you and everything. And then the second I do that, you immediately start with this whole rant about... what I don't know. I don't care what you're talking about, honestly. So yeah, next week that monologue of yours is getting cut short, pal.
Yeah, you know what's funny though is there's a phrase you use: "Turn over a new leaf." Have you ever thought about that? If the leaf has fallen to the ground, to turn it over wouldn't help it because it's not a new leaf; it's a dead leaf. Because it fell down to the ground, I had to turn it over. So it's not a new leaf at all. The entire phrase that you've used, I've used, and we've all used, makes no sense. It's literally a lie, packaged in a conundrum, delivered in a riddle.
It is none of those things.
Okay, what is it?
It is literally saying if you turn over a leaf...
A new leaf?
No, just any leaf.
You said a new leaf.
Let me finish.
Okay.
If you turn over a leaf... and that didn't satisfy your cravings for leaf turning overs,
yeah,
you can go find a new leaf and then turn that one over instead. Because eventually you're going to get tired of...
Oh, but why don't they add the component they left out? Turn over a new dead leaf. That would make sense.
Well, technically you can still do it when it's still on the branch, but it's a little bit more tricky that way.
Wouldn't it spring back?
Well, yeah, that's what makes it tricky. And the whole point of flipping it over isn't necessarily for it to stay flipped over. You're just flipping it over. Who cares if it swings back once you're done?
Yeah, I guess. What kind of leaf do you like to turn over the best? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah. Those insects that look like leaves until you touch them.
What are they called?
Well,
leaf lookers?
No. I think it's actually a species of butterfly that looks like a dead leaf. Yeah.
And you can turn them over?
I mean, with difficulty.
Why, Nick Kress and Carrie Tudor are watching us.
Yeah, like they always do.
Creeping you out?
A little bit.
Ashley Haas is right on top of mine, right behind Nick and Kerry. She says, "Hey, Brad and Wyatt, do you know who Ashley Haas is by any chance?"
Yes.
Who is she? I always forget. She.
Sorry, hold on. I may need to take this. I got a phone call. Dude, I don't know who this scam likely person is, but I really wish they'd leave me alone.
Yeah. No. I've spoken to Scam a couple times.
Do you know Scam?
Yeah, I sent him some money. He was, I guess, down in his luck.
Oh, really? That's nice. Has he said anything after that?
No, he never sent He promised he was going to send me this water from the Jordan River that will heal you, but he never sent it. Well, it doesn't make sense. A scam is somebody you can usually count on.
Get lost in the mail, or
I don't know. I'm thinking about sending him.
Calling him again. Maybe he just.
I'm going to send him some more money and see if that'll help expedite the whole process. Wyatt, Ashley Haas, who is she? I know the name.
Yes.
Ooh.
She is she's the piano teacher who you called on the show that one time.
That's who it is. You don't text her periodically, do you?
No,
because you know that is unethical. It's like client-doctor privilege. It's like low. It's just you cannot fraternize with the fans. Why? It's just people will get the wrong idea.
Look, it may be immoral. I'll give you that, but unethical? That seems like a stretch.
All right, well put. Nick Kress, good evening, Brad. Nick, we already knew you were watching this. You didn't have to jump in. He's back. Cindy Jankovic Haas. I believe she's Ashley's mother. So she lurks around, too. I don't know what it is with the Haas people, but they're everywhere. Susie Smith said hello. Karen Boyd, hey, Brad, hey, White. Hey, it's Karen. Hi, Karen, kiddo. Curry Tudor shows up after she was watching us. Hey, Brad, White, and Peeps. Aaron Oakes is always here. Back again for the highlight of my week. I always feel so sorry for that poor guy.
It's really like the most bittersweet comment.
It is! That's a perfect way to say it. So glad to be here and part of the militia. Thanks so much to you, Brad White, and everyone here. Aaron, thank you for showing up, brother. We hope that you're enjoying what we're putting up, because we're trying and we don't know what we're doing. Paula Faye Marie Rush, she's got 4 names. She's my favorite 4-named lady. Michael Quackenbush, or as I like to call him, the Bushquacker. He's good evening, everyone. Hope you all had a blessed week. Dusty Wilhelm, hello, friends. I just learned about this guy here on Facebook named Topher. He seems to have a heart for God. Might make a good interview sometime. Sure. Send us a link. We'll take a peek. Clovis Jones, everyone enjoy your week. Lisa Petrodushach. Everyone evening. I don't know her. She might be new. Sean Syriac. Boy, Facebook really don't like you. Been trying to wait for you since 8 o'clock. You just do not show up till 5 minutes late. I was here on time. Why? How is he saying I was late? I was here right on time.
No, it's the notifications thing. For some reason.
Why is he blaming me?
Because you can't blame Facebook. They're not going to do anything about it.
Hey, guess what? Kellyanne McDonald Justice. So we're getting 4-named ladies all over the place today. Tony Gonzalez has his ad. He's been sanctioned by Val Verde County because of his stand on marriage and taking illegals to planes from lawful Medicare base. Don't support that crumb. He is worse than Mitt Romney. I don't even know where that came from. She's talking about is it somebody they're voting for? Is he for the sheriff?
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of text about that, and I don't know why. I just ignore them, really.
You know Benjamin Gregory's with us.
Yeah, I know. Of course Benjamin Gregory's with us.
He hasn't been for a while, so we're so grateful you're back. Benjamin, thanks for coming back, buddy. We can count on you. He's our clip leader, right? Always putting out links and clips.
We can count on you for everything except showing up.
Yeah, I know. Well, maybe you didn't get a notice. Jim Bronow's here. All right, greetings, Brad White and everyone. Let's get this thing going. Yes, it's going. T.W. Smith, greetings, Brad and Loin Boy. Sorry I haven't been here in a month. Been working 7 days a week, but hopefully this is a sign that I'm off on Monday nights again. You know, he's always been complaining about that 7 days a week. You know how many people don't work 1 day a week, and yet he gets 7, and he's complaining. Why is he always whining about that? I remember you told me once, what's up with the TW and the wine, and I wasn't going to bring it up on camera. Do you think it's inappropriate?
Of course it is. But, okay. You know, it's also good for views, I guess, so we can go on
I didn't think of that.
I just got a comment from Sean Syriac.
Yeah?
Who says that they've got honeybees going. And so they're going to be sending us some honey and a beeswax candle. Yeah,
can we eat it?
If you're brave enough. I'm just going to point out that if that happens...
What?
That'll be the first time that someone's promised to give us food and actually delivered.
Wyatt, that guy from...
Where was my cow tongue, random person on stream
Was
3
it?
months
No,
ago?
it was like some crazy...
It was tongue. It was animal tongue.
But wasn't it like a moose or something crazy? He was like in
cow.
he was like in Denmark or some crazy place where they have the stinkfish.
Some random spot in the globe like
Yeah.
Denmark.
Roger Bouchard, you have a gift from God, Brad. Keep up your great works. I'm trying. God makes me put it out there, and I just pray He's speaking through me. Why is God speaking through me right now, or am I off kilter? Because I can get back in kilter. Is this closer to kilter?
It's a bit of a desync, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't normally wear kilters, but this time I will. Samantha Schneider, hell, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, I'll say. Look, Ashley Haas, Wyatt remembered me this week. Listen, Ashley doesn't like it when you toy with her, Wyatt. I feel like you're toying with her.
It's not by choice.
Why is it?
I'm busy. I get distracted very
do.
easily.
Yeah, Dennis said, like, hey, Brad, let's see. Look at Karen says, I never wait for the notification anymore, Sean. I just go to Facebook page at 8 p.m. Eastern. Stan Simpson, greetings all, happy Monday. And Greg Smith, hi, everybody. So I think we've caught up to all the regs, the regulars. So I want to give a special announcement. Why? Do you have any idea what that might be? Any shot at figuring out what that special announcement could be?
Told no, because I'm not sure if there's any agreements about keeping it anything hush hush.
No, there ain't.
Oh, right? Okay, yeah, in that case I know exactly.
All right, so here's how it goes. Here's how it plays out. So, as you folks who are watching Brad Stine Has Issues know, and especially for guys and gals who've been watching from the get-go, before there was a loin boy. Why? There was a time when Brad Stine Has Issues went out into the marketplace, and you weren't here.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Well, that was you trying to do your own thing and crashing and burning until I jumped on ship.
So Wyatt, when you jumped on ship to make the crash and the burn even a deeper mire, do you feel like that was an upgrade, or do you feel like all you did was just make the crash worse because you didn't remove the wreckage or the pieces of the body parts that had been smashed? You just left them there. See, I wouldn't.
What happened was I got on board thinking to myself, this would be an easy fix, just plug in a few holes. And then the next thing I knew, the ship was on fire, and there was all this insurance payouts. But hey, now, after all of that was done with, we've got ourselves a brand new shiny ship that hasn't sunk yet.
Do you feel proud that you helped your dad, or do you feel like it was just obeying the Ten Commandments, honor your father and your mother so it might be well with your life? Did you do it because of the Ten Commandments? Did you do it because you just want to help your old man out? Did you do it because I created you from whole cloth?
No, definitely, I don't, we can talk about the other two later. Definitely not that one, no.
Not the fact that you came from my life.
No, the curse of Loin Boy was not my primary motivation.
But don't you like it? Shouldn't we get a T-shirt?
Do not get me wrong. We are doing T-shirts of Loin Boy.
Yeah.
I am 100% on board with that. It's not the direction I expected.
What would mine
to
say?
go,
What would mine say?
That's a good question, next. You already have the "This Isn't Wyatt's" shirt, so...
What about this shirt?
Oh, is that your alma mater? Is that how you call it?
It's kind of yours.
Yeah.
ETSU.
Yeah.
Didn't you go to ETSU?
For a time.
Yeah, whatever happened to that?
Well,
Why did that fall apart? After all the dorm monies I spent.
Well...
Yeah.
If you really want to know...
I do.
It's because the pandemic is my excuse. Hey, say what you will. It's a perfect excuse to getting out of a lot of those situations.
No, it did. We got you out of there because we were afraid they were going to lock down. You were going to be stuck in your dorm. Which, what most people don't know is paradise for you is if they locked you down into a dorm all by yourself, as long as you had pizza and burritos.
Yep. And there was a Taco Bell on campus.
Wow. Those are good times. You know I never went to college, Wyatt?
No.
Yeah, never went. Not one day. Not day one, not one day. And yet I created a little empire here.
Yeah. Emphasis on little. But...
Yeah. And I did want you to know, though, that to me, the American dream worked for me. I went in when I was 18. Professionally, I started, or maybe it was 19, my first job as a professional magician at Poppy's Star in Newport Beach, California, where everybody was a performer. So the waiter would take your order, they'd put in the thing, then they'd come back, grab a guitar, and play and sing. I was a busboy, but then I would do magic tricks in between. The bartenders did magic. You could be a juggler. Everybody had a skill that they did in between running a restaurant effectively, and that's where I was in California. When I started out in my career. But I knew I wanted to be in showbiz somehow, and I figured it'd start with being a professional magician, what they call a close magician. When you're in the restaurants, they called it table hopping, because you go from one table to the other, perform. And now they call it street magic. That's what David Blaine calls it, street magic. But that was the kind of stuff I've done. And you saw little glimpses of that over the years growing up, didn't you, son?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Didn't you ever see any little sleight of hand, little magic, little...
Yeah, you tried to teach me some stuff, too. And
yeah. And how'd that pan out?
Well, it's not so much that I didn't like it. It's just I got distracted because I think there was like a new episode of Mythbusters on that week, and so I kind of just forgot about it.
That could be. Well, we loved Mythbusters.
Oh, that's just the best show.
And which was the best episode?
Blowing up a cement truck. It's just, come on. Didn't even blow it up. Vaporized it.
They did a lot of explosions. But that stink, it made a sound that was like nothing else, almost like a ringing sound, like it was the craziest explosion.
It's like the sound didn't even know what it was trying to be.
Yes. It's like this. It's like it scared the sound waves to not want to utter a noise because they didn't know what was happening. It was like breaking the sound barrier was like just an afterthought. The sound barrier couldn't even catch up. It was the greatest episode, and we loved it, and we cared about it. But, and they stopped. They put an end to their little episodes. But we sit here with our little episode, Brad Stine Has Issues. And here's the thing that's interesting about this show, guys. For those of you watching right now, I say this every week. Thank you for showing up, because you've been fans for whatever reason. People from all over this nation. Karen Boyd's come to 3 live events. She's in South Carolina. Or was it Georgia? She always shows up in South Carolina, so I always get confused if she came over from Georgia or South Carolina. But let's see, Benjamin Gregory's come to at least 2 events in Dallas area, at least 2. And who else was? Oh, Nick Kress came to 2. Did somebody else make it to 3? Oh, Ashley Haas came to 3. What? Yeah. Anyways, you guys showed up to some of my live events. You guys watched me as I sat there in my little laptop. Okay. And I've told you this story before, but there's a reason why I'm doing it again. 3 years ago, during the cult of Corona, during the greatest false flag in human history that destroyed children's lives and mental conditions, where they made up stuff like six foot distance between the two, which Fauci recently said was something they just made up. I mean, the whole thing was a giant psyop to see if they could get humans to give away their rights and do whatever they were told to do, and it worked. So when that happened, I got on and I said, hey guys, Facebook Live, never been on it, just thought I'd say hi. I want to do something because they won't let me work, because I'm in a business where people have to sit next to each other without falling over dead. And that was the illusion they gave us that would happen. So I started out then, and then we said, oh, if you really like this, I'll keep going. And then we said, well, then I need to at least get a camera, because I'm on my laptop, it's not very clear. And then I thought, well, crap, I'm going to have to get a decent mic, so at least it sounds good for you guys. And then we started saying, I don't know, what do you think? And here comes Chris coming from Cincinnati and built this and brought his crew. I mean, what an incredible sweat equity. And you guys donated some money. We got a camera, and then we got another, and then we got another, because we wanted to have a master shot and 2 ISOs so that me and the guests could get their own camera. Then we got 2 mics, because everybody needs to have a mic. And then we got lights, so it looked right. And then we built out this whole little space so we could do it right. And we got the proper equipment behind there so Wyatt could run the thing and make it work. And we could Zoom. And suddenly this thing was just growing into an actual podcast, little by little, step by step, one step at a time. And I said, guys, you know, there's things coming. I'll tell you if they happen. I don't know if they're going to, but it's exciting. It's amazing. And I've always said this to you guys. Always said this. I didn't go into this podcast thinking I was going to have a podcast. I did not want to do a podcast. It was a weekly guarantee. I had to show up if it was going to work. It's hard. You got to keep doing it. You got to show up. You got to figure it out. If you're going to be gone, you have to look ahead. I'm not going to be back on Monday, so we had to pre-record. So it was consistent every Monday, 7 o'clock. You could count it, and some of you do, and you showed up every Sunday. So, you know, it was hard. I didn't know I was going to do it. But here we are, all this time down the road, and I've had some amazing guests. God has given me everybody from a sitting senator to a sword swallower. I mean, that's what I have had on my podcast, and I've got more to come. I have my mic sounds weird right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. Like, no settings were changed. It's just,
Okay, I can't hear myself.
Yeah, I toned you down to try to fix it, so...
Oh, yeah. Okay, but it's still coming out of the mic? Mic still good? My mic?
Yeah, your mic seems to be good, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm got nothing in my ears. Nothing.
Oh, seriously?
Check.
Check to see if your cable is, like, still plugged in, because you may have gotten unplugged.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Is it?
Yeah, just...
Is that it?
Yeah.
Check. I don't know, maybe better. Is that better?
Maybe.
Sorry, guys. Just everything went a little bit south, right when I was going to break the news about how important it was that we have a professional podcast. Right when I was literally going to do that, something ain't right. Can you guys hear me good? Just go ahead and say if everything sounds fine. Nobody complaining, son? Okay.
Not that I can see now.
Look, it went wonky, but it's fixed now. Plug it in. Hey, Brad and Wyatt and everyone. Okay, I hear it better now. Okay, well, anyways, you're right. I will say this. Nothing. Oh, now I can hear it. Nice. What'd you do?
Well, like I said, I toned you down to try to fix the audio issue.
Did you?
Yeah, I told you.
Okay, it was
Will you
really
not explain to
freaking me out.
Explain to you in very simple layman's terms what I was doing.
Okay, listen, I'm a simple layman, so always keep it in those terms. So here's the
Don't
deal.
have to remind me of that.
Here's the deal, kids. Nothing could be more ironically perfect, Wyatt. Nothing could be more ironically perfect than having Brad Stine Has Issues go sideways right before the big announcement. It couldn't be more perfect. What do I mean? As of today, Wyatt and I were told that the largest Christian radio network in the United States, Salem Network, has decided to pick up Brad Stine Has Issues and put them on their podcast platform. We are going on the radio for real. Nationwide. Boom! What? With Wyatt running buttons at the helm? Guys, we did it. We're going in the real big leagues. We're going in the bigs. We're at MLB. Son, what do you think about when I told you when we looked at that email them. They're like, yeah, can't wait to bring you into the family. We're going to have to work on some technical things and really lock it down, but you're in. What do you think about that, Wyatt, when you heard that?
You know, something along those lines.
So, what am I saying? All right. So, if you're a Christian, and if you're not, you're going to hell. So, jump in. Jump in quickly. We want you to hang out with us. Well, when you're a Christian guy, right, you're trying to, you're trying to say all the right things, and you're trying to put on the right impression. You're trying to serve God properly and be a good witness and be everything that you think it means to be a believer. And it's a long, hard process, right? And so one of the things that you'll hear if you grew up in the church like I did is churchianity. You'll hear all the right terms and the bumper sticker phrases and so forth and so on. Well, the reason I say that is because one of the things that people will say is, well, like in the church, is like, hey, thank you guys for helping. We couldn't have done it without you. You're the body. You're the ones that made this happen, right? I mean, you're supposed to say that, and it's true, right? But here's the thing. There's a reason why I have said to you guys for years, and it's been, I guess, getting up on 4, believe it or not, for years, that if this podcast is used by God and it goes out into the nationally and internationally or whatever, if it happens that way, it will be solely because of you. You donated actual money out of your paychecks to help us get cameras so we could look right. You put money in donations to help us get lights so it was lit right. You helped us get a sign so we actually had a logo to look like we're a real place. You helped us put all this in so we're not freezing anymore, and I don't have to wear Russian hats, even though 2 weeks ago it was so freezing even our heater didn't work. Remember that, Wyatt? We put in carpeting to dampen it so that the sound doesn't go wrong. We bought 3 mics, so Wyatt could talk to us too. We got a board back there that that should be an episode sometime, as we'll walk people through the studio so they can see what it looks like. But and then Chris Hammonds, who came down with his crew and literally did the work and put in all the stuff. And then I had to hire electricians to put in all the stuff by code. And we had to put in all the fire block by code. And we had to put in all the insulation by code. And we had to run all the proper venting and the up there ridge vents on top of the little peak of the by code, so that the city of Brentwood could sign off and make this a part of my home structure. I mean, it was a big, giant thing, and it just started me on my laptop. I didn't know this was coming. But you guys show up every Monday, and you say, we like what you do, and we like you, we like what you're saying, and we believe in this thing, and we're doing it as a family now, and as a group, and as a community. We talk to each other, and you get to know each other. Maybe some of you will meet each other someday, I don't know, or maybe you'll come to some show, or maybe someday we'll have a giant, amazing Stine Has Issues cruise that you can go on together. We'll all go there together. Why, you want to go on a cruise?
Maybe.
All right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Do they have food there?
No. Well, they have food. They just don't have burritos or pizza, but they do have lots of mashed potatoes.
Oh, yeah. I just remembered I have a thing that day.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. My point is, my friends, Wyatt and I are going to be on Salem Network, their podcast platform. We'll still be on Spotify. We'll still be here live on Facebook and YouTube live. But their platform will probably be closer to just the guests first, to build an audience, hopefully in the thousands. And then they can come and watch us and see all the banter that Wyatt and I do, and it'll turn into something more. But it has to grow exponentially, and it has to grow because people want to see it. But now suddenly, who knows what happens when we're suddenly out in their platform? Maybe we won't see any difference. Or maybe suddenly you go and come back next Monday and there'll be 1,000 people. I don't know what's going to happen. But we're on Salem. So I wanted to let you guys know first. We haven't signed the contracts. We will, but we're allowed to mention it because they're all in. Wyatt's got to learn some tweaking of the audio because it's got to be at a certain level, which is fine. We want it to be as great as it can be. They're going to composite all the back interviews and shove them all out there, so there's going to be tons of our stuff. We got some great new interviews. I got a new guy I'll be interviewing tomorrow that you'll find very interesting for a lot of reasons that you'll find out soon. Another guy I'll be interviewing on Wednesday. I mean, we're just still plugging along, growing. But my hope is, my prayer is that God's honored, that people that participated see growth, see fruit from this, see value from this, that America sees people come together and join to subscribe so that you can be part of our community, you can be part of our paywall and see all the special stuff that only you're going to see. It's not going to be on the Salem part. That's going to be very specific, audio only. You guys still are going to get this extra stuff. So this is what we got going. I did send out the first 2 shirts. Hopefully the people that receive them will. And then once you do, you have been given your marching orders to put them on, to take a picture, and to email us so that we can have the big demo on one of our podcasts as soon as you guys send me that information. But we need the mighty 10,000, the first 10,000 Americans that will give $3 a month to say we will fight for our sovereignty, our freedom. We identify as Americans. We love God. We're grateful for our country. And we will create the Peasants' Revolt because D.C. has abandoned us. They are purely, completely, and utterly corrupt. So that's where we're at. But let's see what God might do in a third great awakening if we believe that he hasn't abandoned us. So I wanted to let you guys know where we're at. Please share this. If you can get 7 people to join up, let me know, and I'm going to send you a package of all the stuff that you get if you join the Special Forces. I just am trying to say thanks. I really, really, really am saying thanks because I never could have imagined that this was going to turn into something like this. So who knows what God has in store for us? Who knows? Today, though, we have a very, very special guest. I like to think of this as the third leg of the stool of a very specific theme that you guys have been privy to. Probably about 6 weeks ago, maybe more, we had an astrophysicist, Dr. Hugh Ross, who believes in an old universe. 70 billion years old. Earth is, I don't know however many millions, but 10 million, I don't remember I don't remember now all the stats. But he's an old Earth creationist, astrophysicist, Dr. Hugh Ross. Then, maybe just a month ago, a few weeks ago, we brought in a young Earth creationist, astrophysicist Dr. Jason Lisle, and he gave his purpose and his point and his data as why he thinks the Earth is 6,000 years old, the universe is young, and it's because the Bible says so. And he's an astrophysicist. So these two guys are fighting it out, battling it out with their ideas, thoughts, all professionally, all with civility, all with dignity, both Christ followers. Well, tonight will be the pièce de résistance, the final try leg of this stool, because I have the vice president of the Discovery Institute, that who projects the intelligent design argument in the sciences. Maybe a month ago or more, he was on Joe Rogan telling the story. He is author of the new book, I hope you've seen, The Return of the God Hypothesis. That's right, folks. Dr. Stephen Meyer is our guest tonight. That's where Brad Stine Has Issues. We're getting in there. We're getting the big boys, man. And we got more big boys and big girls to come. Can you believe that these guys show up and come on my podcast? But why if they do? Do you think it's because I created you out of whole cloth? And they're just amazed? Yeah.
You know what? I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah, I don't think so. I shouldn't even brought that up.
You already should know, and yet you insist on every week, without fail, continuing to hammer in this. It's almost an obsession.
Yeah.
You must really want the Loin Boys shorts, don't you?
I do. I do indeed. I do indeed.
Well, look. figure out whoever you hired for the Mighty 10,000 show.
Yeah.
Get some prototypes and let's see what we can do.
Right. What
I
do you
may
mean?
even sign them.
Like what?
I don't know. Should I sign them with Wyatt or Lohan Boy? It's
Oh.
kind of hard to... Should I just do both?
What if you did? What if we had shirts? Courtesy of Loin Boy, and you sign it, son. People can get a Wyatt Stine Loin Boy shirt, and that'll be part of our merch.
You know what? That's a fantastic idea.
I just thought
it was almost as good as when I suggested it.
All right, so you're saying that was kind of
Are the last 5 minutes of this conversation any indication of that?
I got confused. I'm going to tell you why. I got so much I got to do. I got to pitch the Mighty 10,000 so that we can actually grow this. Because here's the thing. Even though we're going to be in Salem, they're not paying us. Just so you know how this game works. They don't suddenly say, here's a giant check. Don't work like that. I still have to provide my ads. I still have to provide anybody that would want to be a sponsor now. They will probably have ad revenue connected to our part of the podcast, so hopefully that will help pay for this and help grow us, and that would be great. Specifically because I want Wyatt full time. But Wyatt, I don't know if you want to go full time. I mean, Lowe's is a calling.
Take me away. Take me anywhere. Now.
I'm sorry, son. Have you really lost as Lowe's lost its luster?
Let me put it to you this way. I was in the paint section looking at the paint swatch cutoffs because it's a great way to just really be mad at people who make more money than me doing very bad jobs of their job. And I came across a color called Berry Brown.
Okay.
It's deep purple. Get me out now.
Why didn't they call it Deep Purple? That's a cool name.
Because that would have required effort.
Berry Brown.
Berry Brown is purple, and I'm done.
Well, you understand that brown doesn't in any way connect to purple.
Yeah, try telling that to the people who came up with the name.
Purple is blue and red.
Purple is blue. Well, technically it's cyan and magenta, I think. But yeah, it's blue and red.
Wyatt?
It's not brown.
Is it absolutely essential for you to indicate your nerdiness at all times?
Yes, because it's the only proof that I ever went to ETSU.
Yes, you did, and I'm wearing the shirt to prove it. My shirt now.
That's the other proof.
Yeah. Well, folks, I am so excited. I couldn't wait to tell you guys what has happened to us as a family, and I really mean that. I know you're supposed to say it. It sounds like you're just pandering. I'm not. Wyatt, could we have done this without Karen Boyd?
No, of course not.
Could we have done this without Nick Kress?
Absolutely not.
Could we have done this without Benjamin Gregory?
No, of course.
Could we have done this without Hall of Fame Marie Raunchy?
No.
No. Could we have done this without the Bushwhacker?
Yes. I mean, no.
Cool.
No,
okay.
No.
Could we have done this without Forrest Bainey?
With a name like that, no.
Wyatt, Ashley House. Could we have done without her?
Nope.
How about her mom?
Nope.
Mrs. House.
Yes.
Dusty Wilhelm. Could we have done it without him?
Maybe.
Could we have done it without Sean Syriac?
Who?
You heard him. He's Sean Syriac. Yes or no?
Can I phone a friend?
Yeah. How about Diane Neal? Could we do it without her?
Can I? No.
Yeah.
Yes?
Hey, let me ask you this.
Yes.
I would like to know if you could think we could have done this without Tencel Sizemore. Who's a woman?
Yes.
I finally figured it out after 2 years.
You finally figured that out.
Clovis Jones, could we have done it without him?
I don't know.
No. Could we have done this without Aaron Oaks? Could we have done this without Aaron Oaks? This is the highlight of his week.
Oh, him? No.
Yeah.
No.
Stan Stinson? No.
No.
Not at all.
Okay,
Could
how
we have
about
done
this
this?
then? Who could we have done this without? You?
Yeah, we could do it without me. Why don't you think that if I did one episode where I wasn't here and you just talked from back there, it'd work?
Probably, but
Yeah.
just to save
What if
face,
we-
I'd probably just use a sock puppet of you.
Should we try it?
I'm game, yeah.
All right. Well, here's the deal, guys. You have now been informed about what your donations, your time, your effort, your fans, your loyalty has created. We're going to be on Salem. I can't wait till that starts happening. And then see You guys can listen to us there. Of course, we're on Spotify as we speak. And are we on Apple Tunes too, Wyatt, or something like that? Apple iTunes?
Appletons?
Or whatever. Apple Tunes. Apple. Appalachians. Are we in the Appalachians? Are we working with the poor people in the Appalachians?
Because anything else. Apple Tunes?
Well, isn't there some Apple we're on? Apple Play?
Yes.
Aren't we on something with apples?
I'm sorry, I just can't get over Apple Tunes.
I don't know what it's called. Look, I am a techno retard. I will tell you this. I have tried and tried to sound like I know what I'm doing, sound like I'm proficient at this, but I'm not. I can talk, but I'm a techno idiot, and so I let you run it, and you know you haven't always been sterling, but Lord knows you're better than me. So I want to get these people into this interview, Why? Because this is such a coup. I'm such a fan of this next man because I watched, I've read his books. I love him. The Return of the God Hypothesis is a wonderful return to getting atheists and non-believers to believe that God is in fact scientifically makes sense from the most inductive, deductive, logical form you can take. God simply is the only thing that makes sense. And this man has gotten so much, and others like him, in the scientific literature, peer-reviewed. They have made predictions about what would happen if intelligent design created things as opposed to this done arbitrarily. And those predictions have proven to be true, like with junk DNA and so forth. Thus, doing what science does, if it can make predictions and they come true, it kind of proves that maybe you're onto something. That is, that God is real and he made all this and this all makes sense. And yeah, maybe the world's coming to an end. Maybe the World Economic Forum is going to take over and have a one world government. And maybe the technocrats are going to limit our speech. And maybe they're going to steal all of our food. And maybe they're going to make us eat bugs, and maybe they're going to kill off population and let their demonic, satanic worshipers run the show. But when God comes to wipe their butts out, it'll be a different tune when Jesus said, I'm done. You want to play hardball? Now we're going to bring you the creator of the universe. Buckle up. Well, all that can come from science and the beauty of logic and reason and the proof that the world is made in a way with laws embedded in its very nature, like an engineer and an architect and a mind would do, because that's exactly what God Almighty, my Heavenly Father, is. And he dimensionalized himself once as Jesus just to prove it was real. Wyatt, I am really excited for our people to know that they are helping us launch into a much higher realm on the podcast. But now you get to be with a very special guest. I was so excited to talk to him, meet him, and now I'm excited to give him to you. Folks, next week we'll be back with a whole nother interesting guest with hopefully even new news and hopefully some photos of the guys with the new shirts of the Mighty 10,000. In the meanwhile, God bless you for showing up, and we're just getting started. Enjoy this interview with God's comic Brad Stine and Dr. Stephen Meyer. Oh, you're going to like this. Well, folks, as you know, as a comedian, my job is to bring laughter and joy and merriment to your world. But when I started Brad Stine Has Issues, I felt like I need to bring people on that are interesting and eclectic and have some insights about the world that I don't have. And you know what I found out? That's pretty much everybody. So here I sit trying to do my best to inform you guys, inspire you, and also just to open your minds up and your radar to people that need to be known in your sphere of influence. Because, Lord, have mercy. The season in America, who would have seen what has happened to the West? Who could have possibly imagined what was going to happen to a culture that valued logic and reason and the scientific formulas and everything that made the West the greatest sort of philosophical political construct in human history, and that somehow that was going to go sideways, and we were going to become post-reality. That, I got to be honest, didn't see that one coming. So with that in mind, there are people, thank God, who are out there who are fighting this intellectual crazy with acumen, insight, wisdom, intelligence, education. And so this particular gentleman that I'm about to bring on for you, he's in my top 10 bucket list. Big fan, and have been reading his material for quite a few years. So I am honored that he would lower himself and come on my podcast, because clearly I am beneath his pay grade. But he has helped me to get some different insights about the origins of humans, about what it means to be created, but in a sophisticated way, and to add that even to my comedy, believe it or not. So he's got 3 books. I've read them all: Signature in a Cell, Darwin's Doubt, and the latest, Return of the God Hypothesis. All 3 books you should have on your shelves, and God told me earlier that if you don't have them, you're going to hell. So I'm just saying, it's in Habakkuk. All I can do is go with what he tells me. But these are crucial books to read, to understand, and if I ever want to feel stupid, I just read his books, because the guy is a genius. So please welcome to Brad Stine Has Issues, and I got to find my little clicky thing so the guy shows up. The Discovery Institute Center for Science and Culture, and he started it, Dr. Stephen Meyer. How do you do, my friend?
Nice to be with you, Brad.
Well, I don't know that you'll think that when it's over, but
when you said you had someone on who was full of wisdom and insight, I looked to my right and my left. I wasn't sure who you were talking about. So
I know I was talking about you, my brother, and you know it. And listen, I'm glad that you are self-effacing and not a pride-filled guy, because, and the reason I say that is because as I was trying to gather a little bit of information about you, I went to Wikipedia and just trying to get just a couple of the basic ideas, Doctor. And I have to I have to start this because it ticked me off. Stephen C. Meyer is an American author and former educator. Well, that's nice. He's an advocate of the pseudoscience of intelligent design and helped found the Center for Science. And I immediately said, I don't need to read any more, because you guys have summed it up. This is what I am so tired of. And I'm tired of it, and this is your field, that they have the gall to call it a pseudoscience. And so let's just start right off the bat with the question that I have seen utilized in your interviews, in your books, and so forth, that somewhere down the road, people got the notion that religious belief somehow is antithetical to science. Now, I happen to know that not only is Christianity not antithetical to science, but in fact started it, at least the modern scientific method that we're aware of. So I'm going to let you, as an expert, defend your own position, that not that you need to, but where do they come up with this construct of being able to label you a pseudoscientist? Who comes up with these terms, and why have they reached that conclusion?
Well, yeah, it's an obvious attempt to use a pejorative term to settle the debate without engaging the actual arguments about whether there's evidence for a designing intelligence at work in the history of the universe and life, or whether there isn't. That's an open question. Is mind the ultimate reality in the cosmos? Is there a mind behind the universe that's responsible for life in the universe? Or do we see evidence of only undirected, unguided material processes? That's an open question, and one that you can, I think, adjudicate by looking at the evidence. I was actually grateful for the pseudoscientific label because, well, for 2 reasons. One, because they previously had tried to stigmatize me by calling me an American theologian, but I have no degrees in theology. So people said, wait, I guess you're supposed to be able to edit, the reader's supposed to be edit Wikipedia. No matter how many people have tried to edit the Wikipedia entries, they just go back right away, because apparently there's a 23-year-old in pajamas in the basement, in his mother's basement, that maintains these descriptions when they're ideologically contentious. But the other thing I appreciate about it is that it really highlights one of the aspects of the debate, and that is we've been putting forward evidence of intelligent design, and in particular, and we get back to this, things like the digital code in the DNA, or the extraordinary nano machines that we're finding in cells, or something called the fine-tuning of the laws and constants of physics and the initial conditions of the universe, something that physicists have been talking about for about 70 years now. So we highlight the evidence and develop arguments based on that. And the people who oppose us don't say, no, your evidence is wrong or your logic is wrong. They want to classify intelligent design as non-scientific or pseudoscientific or philosophical or religious or something, and think that by classifying it as something non-scientific, they've won the argument. Right. But that's just, it ends up being a debate about nomenclature. If you want to say something's not science, or if you want to say something's pseudoscience, you have to offer a definition of what real science looks like. And it happens that we're using the same method of reasoning in developing our case for intelligent design that other scientists use. In fact, the very same method that Charles Darwin used in The Origin of Species. It has a name. It's called inference to the best explanation. And I can get into that later too. So we provide evidence. We use a standard method of scientific reasoning, but people try to settle the debate simply by classifying our conclusion as unscientific or pseudoscientific. But they don't offer a definition of science that would allow them to make that judgment. They have an implicit definition of science, which is that if scientists, if a theory is to be considered scientific, it must invoke materialistic causes for everything. But what if you're looking at something that was clearly not produced by strictly unguided, undirected materialistic processes? What if you're looking at something that bears all the hallmarks of the activity of a mind? If you walk into the British Museum, for example, and you see that wonderful Rosetta Stone, when the scientists realized that those etchings on the stone were actually a message in 3 different languages, they didn't infer that wind and erosion had done it. They quickly inferred that there had been scribes, there had been ancient intelligences at work. And so we do know that there are distinctive hallmarks of intelligent activity, and our argument is that we're seeing those distinctive hallmarks in biological systems. Right. So the other side simply wants to settle the argument by name calling or by reference to some abstract definition of what science must look like, rather than actually engaging the argument. And I find that actually somewhat encouraging on our side, because it shows that the counter arguments are weak. If you have to repair to that strategy, that means you're not engaging the evidential and logical arguments that are being put forward for the idea of intelligent design. And now I realize, after that long answer, I didn't answer the first part of your question, which was about the origins of modern science in the first place. And you're right, it did come out of a Judeo-Christian milieu, in particular late medieval Catholicism and the period of the Reformation. The philosophers, the Catholic philosophers and the reformers, the Reformed theologians, rediscovered the doctrine of creation as they were rediscovering the Bible and emphasizing that in their theology. They rediscovered the idea that there was a creator separate from the cosmos, and that the creator, being an intelligent agent, had made the universe in a rational way that we as rational creatures made in his image could understand, or made it possible for us to understand the rationality of the world around us. And so they had a key concept. They called it the intelligibility. They believed in the intelligibility of the universe, that because God had made our minds, we could understand the rationality, the order and design that he'd built into the physical world. And that was one of the founding concepts of modern science, and many others that were, many historians have seen that science started in a Judeo-Christian milieu, and it started for Judeo-Christian reasons. People believed in an orderly cosmos that was dependent on a creator, and one that also made our minds to be capable of understanding his creation.
Well, yeah. And, my hope is in this conversation with you, Dr. Meyer, is to find maybe some nuances and some questions perhaps that you haven't been asked a thousand times, that because there's so many wonderful clips of you on Joe Rogan recently. That was amazing, and so forth. But I'm going to try to find some other elements to perhaps be more refreshing for you to answer. I feel like it'd be like Paul McCartney again being asked. So tell me about yesterday and when you wrote that song. This dude has to have answered that question 60 years. It's like, enough. I wrote it. It was in a dream. I didn't know where it came from. I call it ham and eggs. It turned it but you know what he does? I'm going to say this. You know what I would say? If I was to talk to him about that particular question? This seems way off left field, but this is what the interview is going to be like. So hang on. What I would say to him is this. Do you know what I'm most impressed by you, Paul? That you have answered that question for 60 years as though you'd never heard it before. I'll give you that much, because you have a countenance, Dr. Meyer, that reminds me of only one other guy, John Lennox. You guys are so kind. You have such an avuncular style. I don't know how you do that, because I want to shoot everybody when they start slamming me or ad hominem attacks or whatever. Now, thank God he made me a comic, so I'm given permission culturally to be a little bit more on the edge or whatever. But I got to give you credit, to be able to maintain a kindness and a dignity when you literally are being insulted and ridiculed. Kudos to you, man. I don't know if you would give that to God's work in your life, and that's just your personality. But how do you do that? Let's just start there. How are you able to be so kind and gentle and kind in your retort to people who clearly are antagonistic to you?
Well, it may not be an expression of great character on my part. It might be partly philosophical training. When you realize that people are when you realize that people are making ad hominem arguments, when they're attacking the person or when they're using ridicule, from my point of view, in a debate or even hostile interview situation, I feel like they're wasting their time because the audience can quickly see through that.
Okay.
And so it isn't really necessary to respond in kind. I kind of, in some cases want to just give people enough rope to hang themselves. I've been in debates where there's nothing but that coming from the other side. And I tell you, actually, the first time I was on a national television broadcast, it was, I think I had, there was several of the well-known figures on the other side of the argument were on, and I was pretty young in all this, and I thought I had done really poorly because there was a hostile host, and then there were two other guests besides myself, and they were hostile. And it seemed like no matter how reasonable the arguments that I was making were, it didn't move anybody. And so I had the sense that I must have done really poorly. But then when I watched it on TV afterwards, I realized, oh, I think I came off pretty well. And they came off as being a little bit intransigent and certainly antagonistic. And so I realized that just because somebody else is not being friendly to you doesn't mean that the audience isn't also picking up on that. So in a way, I've always just tried to speak to the audience and not worry about the emotional content coming at me from the other side. So maybe that's part of it. Also, I mean, I do actually genuinely enjoy these conversations with people who have a very different point of view. And I've always felt a certain kinship with people who are interested in the big questions, even if they come up with different answers about them than I do. I mean, there's a lot of people in the culture that are just too busy to think about, where did we come from? Is there a God or not? What is the meaning of life? Things like that. And so when you find people who are interested in those deep questions, even if they are materialists and think that you're a pseudoscientist, it's still refreshing to have the conversations. And so I tend to instinctively appreciate people like that, even if they have a different point of view. So I don't know. That's maybe the best I can say.
No, that's again, kudos to you, brother, because not everybody is able to do that. But the good news is you have evidence and a deep understanding of this material. So it's
Yeah.
not like you're afraid or you're going to get in over your head. You know what you're doing, you know what you believe, and you know why you believe it. But I think that they've made it very clear, the materialists, the atheists, that philosophy is beyond them. Most of them eventually reach some place where they've decided philosophy is dead. I think Stephen Hawking said that at one point. And what they don't understand is philosophy is difficult for them because I think it implies something that they can't answer, which is teleology. I don't understand how these guys, and maybe you get it because this is the only group that you are constantly engaged in, so maybe you can help me understand this. I really, honest to goodness, don't understand how they function as human beings who believe in logic and reason and supposedly in the scientific method where we follow the evidence where it leads. And yet the only conclusion that the highest atheists, in history, at least given the credit of the Nietzsche's and Bertrand Russells and whatnot, have basically said this is nihilistic. If this is true, there's no meta narrative to this whole thing.
Yeah.
And then when they've reached a conclusion that there is no meaning to life, they find meaning in their conclusion. And it's like, how do you not see that not only is your belief system incoherent, it can't function if you live by it?
Yeah,
so
Many find a kind of derivative meaning in debunking the theistic beliefs that give everyone else a sense that there is meaning. It's kind of ironic. Remember, my daughter once said, "Well, if they don't believe in God, why do they seem to hate him so much?" So
right.
But as to the nihilism, you may know the famous quotation from Steven Weinberg, the great Nobel Prize-winning physicist who was at Harvard and then at the University of Texas for so many years. He died in 2022 and was famous for saying, "The more the universe seems comprehensible, meaning to our science, the more it seems pointless." And I think that perspective has percolated into the culture at a very deep level. You think of some of the other prominent new atheists, Richard Dawkins. The universe has exactly the properties we should expect. If at bottom there's no purpose, no design, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. That is a nihilistic perspective. I actually love that framing because he says it's the properties of the universe that lead us to that conclusion, and therefore I think that he's saying that his materialist nihilist perspective is supported by the evidence, which means you can test even metaphysical hypotheses against your observations of the properties of the universe. Right. So in Return to the God hypothesis, I use that framing to say, well, okay, if that's true, if you can test a metaphysical hypothesis by looking at the evidence around us, let's look at the evidence that we have about the origin of the universe, its fine-tuning, the origin of life, and the information necessary to produce it. Are the things we've discovered about those big origins questions about life and the universe, are they really what we would expect if there was no purpose or design behind it? I argue quite the opposite of Dawkins, that actually they're not at all what you'd expect from a materialistic point of view, and instead they're exactly what you'd expect from the activity of a mind. I mean, after all, we have digital code in cells. We have little miniature nanomachines. We have a complex information processing system. 2 summers ago, Dawkins himself expressed wonder and amazement when he saw an animation of how the information is being processed inside the cell. And he said he was knocked sideways with wonder at the digital information processing capability of the cell. Well, none of these things that I talk about in my book, Return to the God hypothesis, were expected by the materialists. So even though they have a materialistic and nihilistic perspective that denies there's any ultimate purpose to human existence or to the universe itself, I don't think the scientific evidence actually supports that perspective. I think it's just the opposite.
Well, and I think that I believe that the evidence that God gives us about himself oftentimes is sort of inherent and self-apparent. For example, the idea that you seek meaning when you believe there is none must say there's a dichotomy. There's something that it doesn't line up.
Yeah.
Even in the idea of wonder. See, I said this in my comedy, if you can believe it, years ago. I was playing around trying to figure out ways to describe the theistic perspective. I said, listen, if you were consistent, the theist looks at a mountain range and looks at the beauty and the awe-inspiring, literally the word awe, to a breathlessness. I'm looking at something sacred. I'm looking at, well, and then I said, but if you're an atheist, you're looking at a pile of dirt. What difference does it make? Why? I said, do you get all teary-eyed if you mix vinegar and baking soda? Because it's just a chemical response, like a nuclear fusion in the sun. How is that sunset suddenly awe-inspiring to you? There is no awe.
The sense of awe and wonder comes when you sense that there's something behind what you're looking at. That there's more somehow more to the story than what meets the eye. I mean, that is the nature of the emotion that's being described. And so what is that? The subtitle of my book is 3 Discoveries That Reveal the Mind Behind the Universe. We have awe about the things we're discovering in life, in the universe, because we sense that there's something, someone, a mind behind it. And I think we can not just sense that now. I think we have very strong evidence and rational arguments to support that sense of awe and wonder.
Absolutely. Well, you know, as we move it a little bit further into this conversation, I do want to get a couple things off the table so we can establish what your perspective is, so that people understand why you get these pseudoscience monikers placed upon you, whatever. And I think we can dispense with that. There were 2 books I think that were somewhat influential in creating this lie that Christianity and science are in conflict. I had to write them. One was by John Draper, History of Conflict Between Religion and Science, and the other one, Andrew Dixon White's History of Warfare of Science with Scientific Theory with Christian. I don't know. I can't read my...
The History of the Warfare of Science and Christianity, yeah.
There you go. Okay,
yeah.
And that they are in conflict. And then...
Yeah, now we're getting back to the question that I didn't really answer with it, which is, this is the idea that science and Christianity are in conflict is really a product of what scholars call late 19th century historiography. It was a historical revisionism that came into fashion in the immediate wake of the Darwinian Revolution in the latter part of the 19th century. And the 2 authors that you mentioned wrote 2 of the most important books establishing this. It happens that at least one of them was not an historian. I think he was a lawyer. In any case, they completely overlooked the whole period of the scientific revolution and the ideas that gave rise to it. If you had people like Robert Boyle and John Ray and Isaac Newton and Isaac Barrow and Johannes Kepler and Galileo, despite his problems with the Catholic Church, these were men that were almost universally devout Christians. And they were studying nature, as the great historian of science, Rodney Stark, put it in the title of his Princeton University Press book on the scientific revolution, For the Glory of God. That was the title of Stark's book, and this was the reason that they were studying nature. They believed it revealed the handiwork of the Creator. Newton's great work on gravitation was called the Principia or Principia, depending on how you like to pronounce your Latin. And he was trying to reveal in his writing the principles, the mathematical principles that underlie the function of nature. And he believed that the ultimate source of the mathematical rationality and harmony of nature was the mind of God himself. In fact, I had a Cambridge tutor in one of my tutorial sessions on Newton wag his finger at me and said, if you miss Newton's theism, you've missed everything. He believed in what my tutor called the ultimate explanation for the laws of nature in Newton's view, he said, was constant spirit action, that there is a universality to the laws of nature and a regularity to the laws of nature and a rationality, a mathematical rationality to those laws, because there is a mind behind the universe who is holding the universe together on a moment-by-moment basis by the word of his power. And so Newton had this profoundly theistic theology of nature that led him to study it. He also made design arguments right in the context of his work. In the General Scholium, which was an epilogue to the Principia, he made a wonderful argument about the fine-tuning of the planetary system that anticipates the kind of fine-tuning arguments that modern physicists are making. He said this most beautiful system of sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. Now, that's a direct quote from Isaac Newton. Now, people often don't think of it. They talk about Newton's mechanistic universe. Well, that wasn't the way he saw things at all. He saw regularity in nature, but he believed that was a product of the constant superintendence of God over nature, and he believed that you could see evidence of God's original creation in nature as well. And he wasn't in any way unusual in this. So there was no conflict between science and religion in the period that historians call the scientific revolution, when modern science got going. Rather, there was a deep harmony that was perceived. In fact, the scientists believed they were seeing evidence of the existence of an intelligent and powerful being, as Newton put it. So this idea that science and religion were at odds really comes about in the late 19th century. And part of it has to do with the Darwinian origin story. And then part of it has to do with the historians of science at the time, or the people writing history of science at the time, who recast the history of science as this story of inevitable conflict that was just being played out century after century. And really, it's a very time period limited sort of characterization. I think there was conflict between science and religion in the late 19th century because you had a lot of materialistic theories of origins arising. The argument I make in the book is that the evidence we now have shows those theories to be incorrect, to be false, and that the God hypothesis that gave rise to the modern to modern science is either coming back or should be coming back because of the things that we're discovering about the beginning of the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe, and the complexity, the digital and informational complexity that we're finding inside cells.
Well, so let's quickly, in a way, describe what you mean by modern science. So are we talking about the scientific method? Because people will sometimes say, well, listen, the ancient Chinese had they created whatever, gunpowder, and they had abacuses, and then there was the Arabics that did the so-and-so, and there was, the
Romans had aqueducts, et cetera, et cetera. No one's denying that there were advanced ancient civilizations, and some of them had technology of various kinds that they had developed. But what was interesting, what happened in the period, historians will typically call the scientific revolution identified as occurring between about 1500 and 1750. But increasingly, more historians are seeing the roots of that going back to the late 1300s, when you have a lot of philosophers at the great medieval universities, University of Paris, University of Oxford, start to develop methods, systematic methods for investigating or interrogating nature. The method that we would call today the isolation of variables is developed. It's first called the method of difference, and it's developed at the University of Oxford. There's figures like Roger Bacon and Robert Grosseteste and others are developing these very systematic methods that then get used as scientists take more and more interest in the natural world. And they're not called scientists initially, they're called natural philosophers. They're philosophizing about nature, but they're using these systematic methods for investigating nature. Now, this approach to nature is unique to the West, or the Judeo-Christian West. In the Arabic world, there's some interesting things that happen. In the Arabic world, there is also a theistic foundation. So there's some common presuppositions. But if you go back to the period of the Greeks, you also have some interest in nature. But there's something about the Greek worldview that inhibits what we would now call scientific advance. And so, let me step back. There was a Marxist historian of science named Joseph Needham, who posed a famous question when looking at the scientific revolution. And he noticed that, yeah, you have these ancient civilizations that have these various technological innovations. The Chinese have gunpowder, the Romans have aqueducts, the Egyptians built the pyramids, et cetera, et cetera. But nowhere else do you see this systematic approach to investigating nature and this deep interest and conviction that nature has secrets to reveal that we can discover if we interrogate nature in the right way. And he says, where does that belief come from? Why does it happen in the Judeo-Christian West? And why does it happen in the West, and why does it happen when it does? And as historians discuss that or investigate that why there, why then question, they also sort of isolate the variables. And they realize that all the cultures had the same they all had the same material benefits. There was always a class of people that had time to study if they needed to, et cetera. But what was different in the West was the presuppositions. There was a presupposition that there was a creator who could have made things differently. This is the idea of contingency, that the creator is perfectly free. The creator of the universe, first of all, there was a creator. He made a creation that was orderly, but he could have made the creation in a different way. It might have been, instead of having Newton's inverse square law, might have been an inverse cube law, or instead of this, in other words, you could have gravity, but maybe it pulled stronger or weaker in another possible construction of the universe. Now, the Greeks had a different idea. They believed in an orderly universe, but they believed that order was a byproduct of an underlying logic they called the logos that was somewhat impersonal. And therefore, the universe had to run in accord with the logos. And so they assumed that whatever was the most rational way for something to be was the way that it had to be. So, for example, the perfect form of motion is obviously a circle. Therefore, the orbits of planets must be moving in circles. And for 2,000 years, we had Ptolemaic astronomy saying that the orbits of the planets were circular, going around, actually the planets were going around the Earth as was the sun going around the Earth. They had the Earth-centered universe. And so even though they had a lot of observations that actually challenged that, they couldn't quite take it on board intellectually. They continued to believe in circular orbits. Along comes Kepler, and in the spirit of this new science, Robert Boyle put it beautifully, the great chemist. He said, it's not the job of the natural philosophers to ask what nature must have done, but to look and see what God actually did do. So it's not a matter of what must have happened. They call that necessary in reasoning, but rather understanding that nature was contingent on the will of a creator, and therefore we've got to go out and see which of the many ways the creator could have done things did he actually do. And so there's this impulse towards empirical investigation. That's one of the big ideas, the contingency of nature upon a creator. Secondly, there's this idea of intelligibility that I already talked about. Thirdly, there's an idea that we're not perfect. The Greeks thought that, well, if we just sat in our armchairs and reasoned, that our reason was always correct because we have rationality and nature is rational, therefore we can figure it out. But especially with the Reformation, the scientists realized that humans were fallible, and that our reason, though generally reliable, we were capable of understanding the rationality that God built into the universe. We were also capable of flights of fancy, jumping to conclusions, and making premature judgments, and therefore we had to constantly test our observations against what was actually out there. So these methods of testing hypotheses became very important, and there was actually a theological predicate to those methods. The idea was, we've got to test our ideas because we know that our minds are fallible. And so you have this twin concepts of human nature. Yes, we're made in the image of God. We have been given the gift of rationality. Therefore, we can understand what he's shown us, but we're also fallible, and therefore we must constantly check our ideas against reality. And so you have this deep interplay between theological ideas about God, about human nature, about the nature of God's relationship to the creation, and the development of rigorous scientific methods for investigating nature, with a confidence that if we used good methods and tested ourselves and held ourselves accountable, our ideas accountable to how nature actually worked, we could discover real and beautiful things about it.
Well, and
so that's the origin of modern science, and many, many historians of science have now seen that the difference that made a difference was actually theological.
Yes. Well, and Judeo-Christian, because
specifically, I would say biblical. I mean, I remember doing a whole essay on the origin of natural law, the genesis of the concept of natural law. I write about it in my new book. In the first 3 chapters, I talk about the rise of modern science in this Judeo-Christian context. And there was an historian named Edward Zilsel who wrote a seminal essay in, I think, 1942, when historians were beginning to really think about this. It was called "The Genesis of the Concept of the Laws of Nature," and he shows that it doesn't really exist in Greco-Roman times. They do talk about laws, the law of nature, but they mean that as a moral thing, that there's a natural law, and they mean that as a moral law that we can perceive by reason using our conscience. But they don't have the idea of laws that nature is governed actively in a way that makes it lawful, that gives it a lawful predictability. And that idea of an external governor over the physical world, Zilsel finds first in the Hebrew Bible. He finds it in the Psalms and in the book of Job, the book of Job, and in some of the prophets. And so he says this is the origin of that concept. It's a Hebraic concept. So it is truly Judeo-Christian in the sense that you've got the reformers rediscovering the Bible. You've got the late medieval Catholic philosophers thinking about what Christianity implies about nature. So you have this kind of mix of a Jewish contribution, a Catholic contribution, a Reformed contribution, and this is happening in Western Europe during this particular time period between 1350 and 1750. This 400 years is extremely generative for what we now call modern science.
Yes. Well, and I think in Islam, God, it can be a little bit more unpredictable or capricious, and so you can't really. There's almost something blasphemous about presuming he's going to do certain things, and then you have certainly other religious beliefs or philosophies where
there's some interesting stuff on that, because there were 2 different schools of thought within Islam, and one where God was more capricious and one where he was less. And science, an early form of science, was thriving in Islam, but within Islamic philosophy, as the scholars who were favoring the more capricious concept of God won out, science sort of died. It was the science that did start was not durable within Islam. So there is a theistic framework there that is similar to Judaism and Christianity, and so insofar as it was given its head, it did have a positive effect on the development of science, and there were Islamic contributions to science, but a durable science that developed a rigorous and systematic methods for studying nature really is a Judeo-Christian occurs in a Judeo-Christian context for Judeo-Christian or biblical reasons.
Well, and I know that Dr. Craig, William Lane Craig's cosmological argument, he always gives credit to Islam.
That is initially a contribution of the Islamic world, absolutely.
So there is something there, but it does seem like Christianity, and certainly its elder brother Judaism, says some pretty radical things about God. It says, let's reason together, as though God said, let's come and you can ask me questions and you can disagree. Israel means let's wrestle. I love that. Thank you, God. He allows us to function with the flawed nature we've become at the fall, because otherwise we wouldn't know if we're even forbidden to question him, or in some ways that we are being blasphemous or evil to him.
I have a friend who's a astrophysicist, a very prominent astrophysicist, Brian Keating. He's a conservative, I'd say believing, God believing, theistic Jew, and a great astrophysicist. He describes himself as an agnostic who wrestles with God. and
Yeah.
and a lot of his secular colleagues don't know the biblical reference to that. But if you're wrestling with God, you obviously believe in him, but you're also uncertain too about some of the big questions in life. Then we all have to wrestle with those. So.
But it's so, I mean, let's just be honest. The transcendent is a difficult concept to grasp, because we're three-dimensional beings with five senses, and we're in a fallen nature, and we don't have omniscience. And so it does cause us to wonder about, God, couldn't you have given us some better understanding? Or if you want us to be in relationship with you, it sure seems like you've left a lot of the pieces out for us to understand, as though he wanted us to sort of, I don't know,
I would say it's as if he wanted us to find them out. That there is I won't have this by memory, but there's a proverb that says it's the glory of God to conceal a matter.
Yes.
And it's the something of kings to find it out. It's it's the honor, or the glory of kings to find it out. I think you have this repeatedly in the New Testament, in the teachings of Jesus: seek and you will find. And I think that if you pursue the truth, that there is more than ample evidence of the reality of God, and that's the burden of proof I take on in my book. And I think we've had these three great discoveries that I focus on, many others, but in the last 100 years in modern science, the really unexpected discovery from a materialist standpoint, that the material cosmos has not been here forever, that instead there was a definite beginning, as best we can tell. And I developed three different lines of argument based on several different classes of evidence in the book to show that, we really do have good reason to believe that the material cosmos had a beginning, before which there was no matter to do the causing. Yeah. And so materialistic explanations become impossible for the ultimate mystery, which is, why is there something rather than nothing? Right. Because before there was something, there was nothing, and nothing has no causal powers. We have cosmologists now wanting to say, well, the universe came from nothing, and somehow physics explains that, but their nothing ends up being a prior mathematical reality, which is essentially conceptual and therefore must exist in a mind. Right. This is, I talk about this in the book. These theories are called quantum cosmological theories. Lawrence Krauss has popularized one. There were two basic versions, one developed by Stephen Hawking and a colleague, James Hartle, and another based on developed by the Russian physicist Alexander Vilenkin. Well, Vilenkin himself has recognized this strange paradox. He said that if the laws of, he says, before there was a material universe, what tablet could these mathematical laws be written on? He says, in our experience, mathematics is conceptual and concepts exist in the mind. He says, then are we really saying that the universe came from a pre-existing mind? I think that is the clear implication of these attempts to get around the clear evidence we have of a beginning, and they fall under the heading quantum cosmology. Right. They presupposed a mind. I think they presuppose a mind before matter. So that doesn't really solve the problem. It reinforces the cosmological argument that William Lane Craig and others have advanced. So that's one of the big surprising discoveries. The universe had a beginning. We also have discovered that from the very beginning, the basic parameters of physics were exquisitely finely tuned against all odds to make life in the universe possible. And this is known as the anthropic fine-tuning evidence, and I think it leads to an anthropic fine-tuning design argument. I think it supports the one of the physicists who discovered these fine-tuning parameters, or some of them, Sir Fred Hoyle, was a long-time scientific atheist agnostic, and he had a complete about-face on his worldview and ended up embracing a form of theism. He was quoted as saying that the best evidence we have of the fine-tuning suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics in order to make life possible. And so you have this exquisite arrangement of all of these parameters so that we live in a kind of Goldilocks or just right universe, suggesting that there was a cosmic arranger. There was the fine-tuning suggests a fine-tuner. And then in the realm of biology, I think the evidence is just overwhelming. You have not only the digital code stored in the DNA molecule, which is completely unexplained by all origin of life theories. We know of one and only one cause for the origin of information in our experience, whether we're talking about the information in a software program to which DNA has been often likened, or whether we're talking about information in hieroglyphic inscription or a paragraph in a book. Information always arises from an intelligent source, and we've discovered that at the foundation of life, an informational code, and reams and reams and reams of information in a digital form. But we also have a complex information processing system. We also have all these amazing nanomachines, sliding clamps, little turbines, little robotic walking motor proteins that are towing vesicles of important materials along essentially railroad tracks made of proteins. It's an automated chemical factory at work inside our cells. And the automation is directed by digital code. It's just extraordinary.
Yes. Well, and one of the, I think there's so many challenges for a materialist to function if he was actually what he says he is, which is someone who seeks to follow the evidence where it leads. I think what's happened. See, here's the problem. Atheists are pretty smart. Usually, people, they're not wise, but they're smart, and so they did something that is counterintuitive to what they claim they are, which is actual seekers of scientific truths, and that they have eliminated an option. There can't be transcendence, thus, let's make it all fit in the material world. Well, that's fine. If you decided, for whatever reason, the only time it can be science is if it's within a material context that we can observe and repeat and put into place and have access to, I guess you can set that boundary if you choose. But if the answer is on the other side of the fence and you've decided we're not allowed to venture there, then even when God gives you evidence, you can't see it, not because it's not there. You've shut off access to some revelation.
You've said this really well, Brad, and this is the key to the whole debate. It's also the key to our initial conversation about pseudoscience. Yeah. The reason that proponents of intelligent design have been defined as pseudoscientists is because we have violated the self-imposed rule of materialist scientists, which say that if you're going to be a scientist, you must limit yourself to materialistic explanations for everything, for human consciousness, for the origin of the universe, for the origin of the digital code and software inside cells, even if from our experience we know of only one cause of the phenomenon of interest, and it isn't a materialistic cause. Again, if you look at the Rosetta Stone, if you look at software, if you look at a paragraph in a book, if you trace the information that we're transmitting right now back to its ultimate source, you come to a mind, not a strictly materialistic process. And we know this from our uniform and repeated experience. So what scientists have done what materialist scientists have done is said that we're going to limit ourselves to materialistic explanations only. Right. Well, what if a mind played a role? What if creative intelligence did play a role?
You're screwed.
You then instead of inferring to the best explanation, you must infer to the best explanation within an artificially limited set of options.
Right.
And that move means that you may be cutting yourself off to very decisive revelation of the activity of an actual intelligence. But you've blinded yourself, intentionally blinded yourself with the rules, the self-imposed rules you've placed on scientific inquiry. It's important to note that those rules were not in play during the period of the scientific revolution. That's why leading scientists from Ray to Boyle to Newton to Kepler to even James Clerk Maxwell, the great physicist upon whom the whole revolution in electronics and is based. I mean, he's regarded as one of the top three physicists in the history of the planet, along with Einstein and Newton, all of whom were impressed that there was some kind of mind behind the universe, by the way. Even Einstein, who was not an Orthodox Christian or Jew, believed that he was dealing with evidence of a mind, that there was some kind of mind behind the universe. Newton and Maxwell, devout Christians. So in any case, Newton and Maxwell also made design arguments. So this is not something that the prohibition against concluding design is of really very recent onset within the scientific world. It's a late 19th century rule that Darwin actually began to advance as a way of excluding some of the competing hypotheses. When confronted with the idea, when he talked about the idea that the similarity that he saw in the structures of different organisms might be the result of a common design plan, he didn't say, well, no, that isn't an adequate explanation. He said, no, but that's not a scientific explanation. And so that's where you see the move first being made. He said, no, we just will exclude that from consideration. It might explain it, but we're going to define it as not scientific, and therefore we don't have to consider it. Well, and that's where when people say, well, the evidence isn't plain, well, it's not plain if you do this. If you say, I'm not going to consider certain types of explanations that may be more consistent with our understanding of the cause and effect structure of the world, which is, I think, the ultimate thing we should be appealing to when we're developing explanations about the past. How does nature work in the present? What are the causes that produce certain types of effects in the present? If we know of only one cause that produces information, and that cause is an intelligent agent, when we find information in a system whose origins we weren't there to see, namely the cell, the most rational thing to conclude is that that too had its origin in the same type of cause that produces the same type of effect in the present, that being digital code in this case. Well, Bill Gates says DNA is like a software program, but much more complex than any we've ever written. Okay, what follows from that? Well, we know it takes a programmer to make software. Does that not then also argue that the digital code that we see in the cell had a master programmer as its cause?
Well, but this is where you have to jump to another way to see things that you accept as plausible, and that's hard because you're used to what you can touch and taste and feel. That's what you're comfortable with because that's what has worked for you and functioned with. But what's interesting is how the scientists have abandoned their legacy or their lineage of the natural philosopher. Those original scientists that launched the very scientism they worship said, none of this is going to work unless we believe there's a deeper meaning to all of this, and there's something that we are not trying to see. These guys kill me. They'll observe something about nature, draw a conclusion, and say, and then act like they invented it. It's like all you did was see what's already working. You didn't make it. It's already there. So you're observing God's handiwork. You're not creating some new concept. It's always been there. So they ignore something that, and here's, maybe you can help me. You're a scientist. You're in their world. So explain this. Why wouldn't the discovery of God be the greatest discovery? Why wouldn't that be interesting to a scientist? So there's something else at stake here to cause them to so be disturbed. And these are terms they'll use. We're uncomfortable with these conclusions. We're disturbed. We find ourselves in befuddlement, whatever term, if it leads to potentially a mind or a
creative intelligence of some kind.
But they say they're uncomfortable. It's like, why are you comfortable discovering an alien, maybe, or an amoeba on another planet, but not God? What is it about God that you would find not a scientifically viable construct to explore? What is going on? What do they fear?
Let me come back to that question, but let me clarify something about how science works, because you mentioned that scientists are used to looking at observations of things that they can measure or test or touch with the senses, and nothing in our case for intelligent design undermines that. Yeah. Scientists correctly observe the evidence of the natural world. They may measure it, they may make careful observations, the basis of the case for intelligent design is what we see and have observed and what we have discovered about certain classes of evidence in nature, whether it's the complexity of the cell or the fine-tuning of the physical parameters of the universe or the evidence that we have from observational astronomy concerning the beginning of the universe. What we then do is we make an inference from that evidence to an unobservable entity, granted, which, if true, best explains the evidence that we see. The unobservable entity would be a prior designing intelligence, or a mind. Now, is that a violation of the scientific method? Turns out, no. Science is indirectly inferential. There are all kinds of things in science that we don't see that we infer or postulate because of their explanatory power. We don't see quarks. We don't see subatomic particles. We don't see directly subsurface geological faults. We might infer them from seismic data. We don't see gravity. We don't see the fundamental forces of physics. We see their effects. And we infer often causes from effects, even if the causes are themselves unobservable. In fact, there's a whole literature in the philosophy of science about the role of unobservable entities in science. So if it's okay to infer unobservable subatomic particles, or if you're an evolutionary biologist, unobservable past events to explain evidence that we have in the present or evidence that we have before us, why is it illegitimate to infer an unobservable creative intelligence if we're seeing the distinctive hallmarks of intelligent activity in something we do see, that we do observe?
No,
so
that's
a rhetorical question. The obvious answer is it isn't. It isn't illegitimate. We're doing the very same kind of thing that scientists do all the time. So then that does lead to the question, well, then why are scientists so uncomfortable with creative intelligence as a theoretical construct or as an inference to the best explanation, whereas they would accept the existence of other unobservables
and welcome it.
Welcome it. So here's a story. When I was a young scientist, I attended a conference that came to the city where I was working that was investigating the big questions at the intersection of science and philosophy. The origin, and the questions were these: the origin of the universe, the origin of life, and the origin and nature of human consciousness. The conference was unique in that it invited leading scientists who had who had competing worldviews. Some were materialists or atheists on the one hand, and others were theists on the other. And at the conference, on the very first panel about the origin of the universe, where each of the scientists was going to give a talk and then have a panel discussion following, the scientists rose to the podium and took their respective places. And when they did, one of the scientists that rose to the podium was Alan Sandage, who was a great astrophysicist. He was at the Palomar Observatory at Mount Wilson. He had been Edwin Hubble's PhD student. He was, by this time, this was in the mid-'80s, he was a scientist of considerable renown, one of the great astronomers and astrophysicists in the country. He rose to the podium and unexpectedly sat down on the side with the theists. And there was a kind of murmur in the crowd because he was a well-known agnostic materialist in his worldview. He ended up giving a talk on the evidence for the Big Bang and the evidence for the universe having a definite beginning, and then concluded by saying, here is evidence for what can only be described as a supernatural event. There's no way this could have been predicted or explained within the framework of physics as we know it. Why? Because, as I said, it's evidence for the material universe, the material cosmos, having come into existence a finite time ago, before which there was no matter to do the causing. So Sandage went on then to explain the reflection, the deep reflection that this evidence had induced in him, and that he had been made very uncomfortable, as you had said, by this evidence, that he was used to, as a scientist, following the chain of cause and effect back from one material effect back to a material cause, back to a material effect, back and back and back, all the way to as far as he could go. And now he encountered a material effect, the origin of the material cosmos, that could not be explained by a material cause. And he realized that, in addition, the evidence for a beginning seemed to reinforce the message of the book of Genesis, that first words of which are in the beginning, and that he was looking at evidence of some kind of a supernatural cause, some cause beyond nature. And he said that the more he thought about it, the more he realized that actually there was something wrong with him, that he prided himself on his scientific objectivity, but yet he did not want to follow the evidence where it most naturally led. And then he realized, what is that in me that is uncomfortable with the idea of a transcendent creator, a creator beyond the cosmos, which he thought was the obvious and most logical explanation of this evidence. At that same conference was Robert Jastrow, who wrote a book called God and the Astronomers, as an agnostic, who has said, he's now passed away, but he, like Sandage, said the most obvious implication of all this, he said, is strangely theological. And he has this famous passage at the end of his book, God and the Astronomers, talking about how the scientists have been devoted to reason, and they've followed the evidence where it leads, and they scaled the mountain of the highest peak, trying to eliminate all ignorance, and they get to the final peak, and he says, and behind that peak is a band of theologians who have been waiting there for centuries. It's a theological answer.
Yeah.
And he said the same thing. He said, I find myself in a difficult position. I find myself uncomfortable with this. I don't like it, but this is where the evidence leads. So I think there is something, my own take on this is that in each of us, there's a kind of push-pull. We'd like there to be evidence for the existence of God, and we theists need to acknowledge that, because without it, we have Steven Weinberg's nihilistic universe, the pointlessness of everything. And Bill Craig has been in a recent discussion that I saw where he made this point very well. For something to have significance, for something to be meaningful, it means a precondition of something being meaningful is that it could have been otherwise, that my actions make a difference. If my actions don't make a difference ultimately, then things are not ultimately meaningful. So right. Bertrand Russell sensed this, the great atheist. He said, all the great, the highest noonday achievements of the human experience will be extinguished in the heat death of the universe, right. Ultimately. And nothing that any of us does for good or for ill, as we would define it, will ultimately matter. And the great scientific atheists have articulated this beautifully. And so we would like there to be a transcendent creator who will persist beyond the heat death of the universe and can offer us eternal life, so that the things that we did in this life do have ultimate significance. All of us sense that we want the purposiveness that comes from living in a purposeful universe. So that's a motivation we have to believe, but we also have a motivation not to believe. And some of the great scientific atheists have been very explicit about this. The Huxleys in particular have said that, we really like this materialistic view. For one thing, it underwrites our sexual freedom and our lack of accountability to some great moral judge. And
it justifies hedonism, and there's no moral absolutes. Thus, there's nobody that can make a judgment. I think even I was talking with Dr. Hugh Ross, astrophysicist. I'm guessing you know him, but he
very well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he was saying that there was a gentleman that was staying with Hawking, who was a Christian, and
probably Donald Page, a great physicist from Canada. Yeah.
And he had said to Hawking, "Listen, I'm a Christian, so I get up, I have prayer, I read the Bible. Is that cool?" And he's like, Hawking apparently said, "That's fine, as long as one condition, you allow me and my wife to sit in." I was like, "What?" Okay. So he did, but he said that Hawking had no problem talking about God, maybe postulating about him, examining it, until he got personal. The moment he was a personal God, he's checked out. And so
you can understand that in Hawking's case. Here he is, this brilliant mind. He's been crippled by this disease. He lives his life very productively, but in a wheelchair with a voice synthesizer. You can understand the guy might have some issues with the Almighty. Yeah. But he was very much. I was fortunate to attend a lecture series that he conducted in Cambridge that became the basis of his very popular book, A Brief History of Time. And Hawking was, I think, within the Cambridge community, a well-known God-obsessed scientific atheist. He was really obsessed with the God question. And he was seen at different times being his people would let him down from the van in the wheelchair, and he would sit in the back of, there were two churches in Cambridge in particular where he sometimes would make appearances. So he was wrestling with all these things. He was, by the end of his life, I think he was writing stuff that was, properly speaking, part of the new atheist genre. But I think many of the new atheists are God-obsessed atheists. That's why they've been so strident about it. But my point before was that we cannot settle the argument about the God question by appealing to the motivations that we have either to disbelieve or to believe. A lot of Christians will say, well, you don't believe in God because you don't want the moral accountability. And a lot of atheists will say, well, you do believe in God because you want the comfort of a cosmic father. That's a kind of a crutch. I'd say
a Freudian wish fulfillment.
Wish fulfillment. I think those arguments are a wash either way. Let's just all stipulate. We have reasons, we have motivations to believe and to disbelieve. That is the human condition. What I've tried to do in Return to the God hypothesis is look at the evidence and address the question that Dawkins himself raises. Do the properties of the universe, are the properties that we observe in the universe what we would expect if theism were true, or what materialism or naturalism were true? And then weigh the evidence and use some good metaphysically neutral tools of reasoning that philosophers have developed to weigh the evidence. And I come to the conclusion that the God hypothesis is back, that it's stronger than ever, and that the evidence is actually quite compelling, that the best explanation of the ensemble of evidence that we have about biological, physical, and cosmological origins is provided by the postulation of a transcendent intelligence who is also active in the creation. And therefore not a deistic creator, not a space alien, but rather a creative intelligence who has the attributes that Jews and Christians have always ascribed to God himself. And that's the case I make in Return of the God hypothesis.
And Return of the God is an amazing book, and we'll have the link up there. Listen, we're getting close to the hour. I do not want to abuse your time, but if you have time, I'd be happy to. I have a few more questions, but I don't want to. Maybe you have a hard out or something.
I can stay till about 20 after this hour. So we got another 10, 12 minutes if you want to
say, let me just try to do it real quick. And I do appreciate it. I don't want to take advantage. Maybe you'll come on again someday.
Well,
I don't know.
The problem is probably the length of my answers as well.
It's
not your questions.
No, I'm so grateful for them. Well, okay. So let me at least do this then, since we only have 10 minutes, 12 minutes. The first thing I want to do is I do want to differentiate for my viewers the difference between neo-Darwinism, its perspective, creationism, and intelligent design, because I think a lot of the malice that comes your way is because people want to define your scientific endeavors to seek the transcendence in regards to the natural world as some kind of 6-day literal creation, 6,000-year-old creationism. So in a synopsis,
let's throw a fourth thing in there, and that is the God hypothesis. Okay. So
yes.
there is a theory that I've been part of developing called the theory of intelligent design, and the best way to understand it is in contrast to a particular meaning of the term evolution. Evolution can mean three things. It can mean change over time. It can mean common ancestry of all organisms. And it can mean that an unguided, undirected process, usually conceived of as natural selection acting on random mutations, produced all the forms of life that we see, and produced also the appearance or illusion of design that we see in nature. So when we're challenging Darwinian evolution, we're challenging that third meaning, the idea that there's an unguided, undirected process that that explains the appearance of design such that the appearance of design is an illusion. The neo-Darwinists say design is an illusion. It's merely an appearance.
Right.
We coined the term intelligent design to contrast our view with that, to say, no, we
Isn't
think
that kind of redundant?
what's that?
Intelligent design? I mean, doesn't
Well,
design...
it was a necessary redundancy because the Darwinists will say, yes, there's design in nature, but it's only the appearance of design, not real design.
So that would be not design at all, though.
Well, strictly speaking, yes. They believe in apparent...
I'm just trying to show their own... I'm trying to explain their own inconsistencies with the... Every time they try to speak about non-design, they use design words every time. So they can't even live by their own...
Francis Crick said the biologist must constantly keep in mind that what we're looking at was not designed, but instead evolved. Okay. Yeah. Richard Dawkins says biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. So we took them at their word and said, okay, that's your theory. Our theory is no, it's not just apparent design, it's actual design, actual intelligent design. Okay. Yeah. So that's what we're challenging. What I've done in Return to the God Hypothesis, having written 2 books arguing that there is evidence of an actual designing intelligence in life of some unspecified kind, I then was asked by many of my readers, well, who do you think the designer is and what can science tell us about that question? So in the first 2 books, I didn't attempt to identify the identity of the designing intelligence, although I did indicate that I thought that the theory of intelligent design and the evidence for it had theistic implications. It was consistent with and friendly to theism. But in the 3rd book, Return to the God Hypothesis, I go beyond just the theory of intelligent design and the evidence for it to address that larger metaphysical or worldview question. Who is the designing? If there's evidence of design in nature, what can we say about the nature of that designing intelligence? That may go beyond the theory of intelligent design, but it's an obvious line of inquiry to pursue beyond it. And so I've investigated the metaphysical or worldview implications, and I do that by bringing in not just evidence from biology, but evidence from cosmology and physics to show that we have evidence of design from the very beginning of the universe. This could not be, the design we see in life in the universe could not be wholly explained by, for example, a space alien within the cosmos. No being within the cosmos could explain the origin of the universe itself or the origin of the fine-tuning of the universe that we have from the very beginning of the universe upon which its later origin would depend. That would be getting the cause after the effect. And that's so anyway, I argue for a theistic designer in the 3rd book. Now, the relationship between intelligent design and creationism is as follows. Many creationists are proponents of intelligent design because all creationists think that a designing intelligence played a role in the history of life. But creationism makes other claims that the theory of intelligent design doesn't make, in particular claims about the age of the earth and the nature of the Genesis days. Yeah. So therefore you could say that creationism is a deduction or an interpretation based on scriptural data, whereas the theory of intelligent design is an inference from biological and physical evidence. The one is more of a theological research program. The other is a scientific research program insofar as it's based on scientific evidence and using standard methods of scientific reasoning. Right. Also, there are ID proponents, intelligent design proponents, who are also young Earth creationists, but I would say most proponents of intelligent design accept the great antiquity of the universe and of our planet, and therefore would not be young Earth proponents, but rather would accept the old Earth idea. But that's not inherent to the theory of intelligent design because it's an age-neutral theory because it's addressing a different question. Is the design evidence of design we see in nature real or merely apparent? We fall on the side of reality.
Well, and you guys have been very careful of not utilizing the Bible as a reference point, even though I'm sure you could find scriptural phrases and lines and concepts that are in line with what you've concluded, because we believe the Bible is God's revelation. So there must, and Hugh Ross does that a lot. He'll make some scientific proclamation. He'll say, it says that in Psalms. It's like, what?
Yeah.
So he's interesting in that regard. But I like, honestly, that you guys have avoided that, not because you don't think there's a consistency there, but just to sort of neutralize a potential weapon against you.
Well, what Hugh's doing is a form of scientific apologetics, and I think that's a very legitimate enterprise. And in a way, in my last book, I'm doing a bit of that. But that doesn't mean you can't also develop intelligent design as a scientific research program.
Yes.
Which we're doing actively at Discovery Institute, not only showing that data we already have is best explained by invoking the activity of a creative intelligence, but also that if you posit a creative intelligence, that leads to certain empirical expectations about how life, for example, should have been put together, that you can go and investigate. And the postulation of a designing intelligence having acted in the history of life actually can help us make discoveries, because we would anticipate certain things in life that the materialists would not anticipate. For example, we were the first to predict that the junk DNA would end up not being junk, but rather importantly functional. And that was a direct consequence of viewing life as a design system, whereas the Darwinists, when they encountered this the non-coding regions of the DNA, said, oh, that must be the leftovers of the trial and error process of natural selection. That's the random stuff, that the flopsome and gypsum that natural selection discarded. And we said, well, no, if life was designed, we know that there are mutations, but we wouldn't expect that the signal would be dwarfed by the noise. So we predicted that those sections of the DNA that were not coding for proteins would be not junk, but importantly functional. And that's now been confirmed by from some very a wide range of scientific studies. So this is one example among many of ID making different predictions. And guiding, therefore, research in a different direction, and that research has proven to be very fruitful. So
that's amazing.
So scientific apologetics is great, but so is scientific research based on a different premise, and that's what we're mainly doing at Discovery. Although I'm not but we're also interested in these bigger philosophical questions. So who is the designer? That's fair game. Let's answer it. We don't need to all stay in little boxes all the time. This is the endeavor of the demarcationists who want to define the outcome, who want to settle the outcome of a debate by defining terms. You're a pseudoscientist, so therefore, or if you're invoking God, well, therefore that's religion and not science. Well, why can't it be both? Why can't it be science pointing to a religious conclusion? That's what the early founders of modern science thought they were doing. We're getting back to that. That's why I call it.
Because the presuppositional worldview of the materialist is there is nothing else to discover. So we have to maintain this parameter to make it authentic. Because that's arbitrary. You chose that. Nobody else has to agree with your perspective. Not only that, it's lacking science. Listen,
you're not only a good comedian, you're a good philosopher of science. That's exactly that is the key issue, and how the mischief is done. That's how people people are kept from seeing what the evidence is pointing to.
Well, and that's what I've always said, is it's not that the evidence isn't there. That's what they always say. There's no evidence for God. No, it's there, but you can't interpret it because you've cut off access to revelation. I'm going to ask you one more question, because you said you had to go, but you got to promise me you'll come back, because we got to talk about the soul. We got to talk about transcendence. We got to talk about the mind.
We've got a new book called Minding the Brain. You should get some of our guys who contributed to that on. It's fantastic.
Well, okay. So let me ask you just quickly this. This is for all of you out there who've joined the Militia of the Mind, which is my way of the Peasants' Revolt, people who care about liberty, freedom, and free speech in America and want to maintain that by having people like Dr. Meyer and others who are all fighting the good fight, believe in God, but believe that liberty and freedom is also an essential part of being able to worship and think freely. So let me ask you this, one last question. If there were any... Is there any element of evolutionary theory, I'm talking about macroevolution, the big one, not the just adaptation that we all see, that is the most difficult to overcome, or is compelling to you to go, okay, that's a tough one. That has some, I have to think this one through to see how to overcome that. Is there anything that's kind of been kind of didn't stump you, but perhaps gave you pause about the materialistic viewpoint of origins?
Increasingly, I would say emphatically.
Folks, this has been Dr. Stephen Meyer. Again, brother, I want to tell you how much I appreciate your work, your intelligence, your sophistication. We need much more of that from the pulpit, let alone in the scientific endeavors, to show Christians that your lineage is truly the truth tellers of human history. We're the ones that created science, hospitals, the idea of loving your neighbor, your enemy, taking care of women.
Human
children.
rights, representative democracy,
It's
the
all
concept
ours.
of intrinsic human dignity. These are all endowments of our Judeo-Christian heritage, and we need to recover them if we're to survive as a civilization.
And do so boldly and apologetically and with a warrior mentality that we will not be, we might go down, but we will go down swinging. Folks, you know, I want to tell you how much I appreciate Dr. Meyer coming on. He's a very busy man, and to take time to be on my podcast, truly it was an honor. And I hope you'll come back, because there's so many other areas I'd love to really go deep, especially when it comes to the idea of consciousness. And you said you're going to write a book, or maybe you're in the midst of that. So perhaps that'll be a great
We've
time
got one that's already come out. So we'll share some other titles and topics with you. But thank you for the invitation and for the time. It was great for me too. I really appreciate it.
Well, it was an honor. And folks, as we've said, this is a peasants' revolt. DC's abandoned us, folks. It's going to be up to the people to return truth and logic and reason, and to retain our heritage in the West, not just America, but in the West in general, to be proud of our heritage, but also as Christians to stand for truth that God Almighty revealed himself. And here, this is taped at Christmas time, the greatest, most incomprehensible story. God Almighty, a transcendent force, a mind, dimensionalized himself so he could, not only could he connect to us, but we could see him, because he's no longer in the transcendent form, the spirit form. This is real. It's true, whether you like it or not. Jesus is the way to Christ. Christ is the way to God, and God is the way to eternal goodness and utopianism with him in heaven. That's how it works. Remember, folks, PC free is liberty. If they say you're politically incorrect, thank them for the compliment. And this is God's comic Brad Stine saying thank you for showing up. And remember, I'm doing what I always do. I'm just putting the woke back to sleep. I'll see you next Monday.